My husband and I were on a hike at DuPont State Forest at these beautiful waterfalls called High Falls. And he was doing some photography. He's an excellent photographer. And I was sitting at the base of the falls, meditating and getting in touch with nature and spirit and praying and talking to my loved ones who crossed over. And I just asked for a sign. I said, I want to make a positive difference in the world. If there's something I can do to help others that I'm not already doing, please give me a sign and I'll try to listen and follow that. Well, I was expecting something subtle, a friend loans me a book or something like that. What I got was a lightning bolt. No, I'm kidding. But it felt like might as well have been. What I got was a direct message from spirit. It just popped into my head like a thought that came out of nowhere. And the answer was that I should learn to channel for loved ones who've crossed over. And at the time, I knew what a medium was, but I certainly never identified as one myself. And so I just said, okay, how shall I do this? And I just, boom, got the answer right into my head. It just popped in. And that was to read books, spend time in meditation, and connect with other psychics and mediums.
Welcome in. I'm Kimberly. I'm so excited about our guest today. I actually met her. Well, I kind of accosted her and asked her for a card when we were at the Sedona Ascension Conference together. I'm really excited for you to meet her. But before we get started, if you're enjoying this content, make sure you hit that subscribe button and click the notification bell so you don't miss any of our upcoming videos. And if you'd rather listen than watch, you can find us on all podcast platforms, Spotify, iTunes, that whole thing. Also, if you want to keep track of what's going on around the planet, but you're feeling a little overwhelmed, you might want to sign up for our Friday morning email newsletter. The link is in the description box down below. Every Friday morning, we send out a very short, very sweet, informative, very free email newsletter highlighting what we think are the important events that happened around the planet. Super easy to sign up. You just click the link in the description box down below. I think you're going to love it. In today's toxic world, taking care of our health is more important than ever. One of the natural solutions I've integrated into my routine is the benefit of mushrooms. And the go-to place for me is Birch Boys. They are without a doubt one of the greatest resources for mushroom products on the planet. Made in the USA, sustainably sourced, and run by an absolute wonderful entrepreneur, Birch Boys has become my go-to for natural health solutions. While they have a wide variety of mushroom products, the two that I use every day are right here. First, I use the ChagaNOW, which is a wonderful mixture that I put a tiny little scoop in my morning coffee to support my immune system. Chaga is one of the most effective immune support compounds on the planet, and this is a super way to get it into your daily diet in an easy to use formula and very, very effective for immune system support. And if you're looking for clear thinking, I can tell you, you'll be surprised at the effects of lion's mane. I use this lion's mane tincture, 1 teaspoon every single morning, and the difference in the clarity of my thinking is extraordinary. I was actually really, really surprised. Birch Boys has a whole lineup of mushroom tinctures. Make sure you check them out when you're on the website, but I'll tell you what, these are my two favorite and I use them every single day. They are absolutely a quality company built on integrity. Go to birchboys.com and use the code NEWEARTH for 20% off your entire order. Birch Boys mushroom products, I think you're going to love it. And with that, I'd like to welcome in psychic medium Kelly Palmatier. Hi, Kelly. How are you?
Hi, I'm doing well. How are you?
I'm wonderful. Thank you so much for taking the time to do this. I'm really excited to share with you today.
Thank you. I'm really excited to be here.
Yeah, I love your background. It's very, very
Thank you.
perfect. It's perfectly on point. So
Thank
what
you.
I want to start with is, what was your life like before your spiritual gifts came on board, or maybe they were already there. So why don't you share that story with us?
Sure. Well, I think everybody has some degree of psychic ability. It's really just like your own different level of intuition. And I definitely had little things happen to me as I was growing up, little things that made me think, maybe I was psychic. But it was when I was in my teenage years, I really developed a strong interest, and I would read books and try experiments and really develop my skills that way. I remember back when I was a teenager, this was before caller ID existed, and the phone would ring, and I would practice my psychic skills by greeting the caller by name. Hi, Leslie. Hi, Jean. And my callers would be like, "What? How did you know?" And it was really cool. As a teenager, I was like, "Yeah."
Okay, what
But
was your success rate?
uh, it was really about 100%.
Oh
I
my
mean, I
gosh.
remember getting it wrong, I think once. So I guess 99%.
Okay, didn't that set you back?
Yes.
I mean, didn't that just make you think, oh my gosh?
The one time I got it wrong, yes.
No, all the times you got it right.
Oh, no, that didn't set me back at all. That was encouraging me. Absolutely.
It just felt
Yeah.
right and natural to you. You weren't
Uh-huh.
surprised.
Yeah. And
Yeah.
then I went on to study parapsychology at the University of Kent at Canterbury in England with Professor Chris Cherry. And that was very rewarding. And then while I lived in England, I also mentored under professional psychic Jo Wynn in Sussex, England. And she's amazing. In fact, she's still a dear friend of mine. We talk on Zoom all the time.
Mhm.
But I really actively worked at developing my skills at that point. And I did psychic readings off and on for my family and friends for 30 something years until I finally got a direct message from Spirit telling me to develop my mediumship skills. And that's when I started offering my services professionally.
Oh my gosh. Okay, so you started out with the real psychic skills. Can we go back to when you were in England? I
Sure.
would love for you to share what the curriculum is like for that type of study.
Well, it's not that I got a degree in it. I took a course with Professor Chris Cherry called The Self, Issues in Philosophy, Religion, and Parapsychology. So we really kind of talked about all these different aspects of identity, and there were some parapsychological elements in the course, but more exciting than that to me was that I developed a friendship with my professor, and he and I would have conversations and try things outside of the actual curriculum. So, I did get to participate once in, I believe it was called the Gansfeld, where you put the ping pong balls over your eyes and you lie down with the white noise and you say what you get. And then I participated in another experiment, and he wasn't running these experiments, but letting me know about things that he knew, where there was in Canterbury, there was a group that did table tilting and table levitating. And somebody was doing this scientific aspect where they would measure the weight loss in the table. And I was able to participate in that group several times. And that was really interesting and eye-opening.
Yeah, I've heard about that. There's a group of people, and then they build up the power
Mhm.
and start moving inanimate objects. Is that what
Yeah,
happened that evening?
it is. It is. And, that's one of those things that until you've experienced it, it really sounds out there. And some people might be rolling their eyes about now, and that's okay. But it was really amazing. For me, I enjoyed the table tilting part more than the actual levitation, but it was all really very interesting. The way it works is there's a table, and there are different psychological aspects that are involved as well. So the table that we use, it has to be something that is lightweight enough that it's conceivable that we could lift it. And for the table tilting part, there were four of us or more sitting around in chairs around the table, and we would just barely touch our fingertips to the top of the table, not the sides, but to the top. And then, and and it would start to pick up one leg at a time so that it kind of would like rock back and forth. But there are all sorts of little details. Like, for example, the lights are out when you do this. So psychologically, you can be saying, this is really weird, but the lights are out, so maybe somebody's cheating. So it's okay. That's why. It's like there are these little tricks as to why your brain can accept what's going on. And then we did that. And I remember at the time doing it, and the table kept kind of, as it would move, it would kind of walk away from me. And I was getting really frustrated by that, thinking, I'm putting so much energy in. Let me put in more energy, really focus my energy to try to get it to come towards me. And then finally, one of the ladies who was more experienced in the circle moved her chair to the other side across from me and said, I'm just going to kind of balance out the power here. And I realized that I was actually inadvertently pushing the table when I was focusing so hard.
Oh, that's so interesting. So was there instruction about how to focus or what to focus on?
No, no, because it's the type of thing when you deal with psychic energy, there's not a real easy instruction. Focus your power. It's pretty much like you imagine that you're sending power, and that kind of does it. So there's not like a real technique. It's more of when you do it, you're doing it.
Yeah. Did you ever take that experience and move little things on your own, like a pencil or, just for fun?
I wish I could, but no, I don't. I've never been able to do that. I've tried a few times, but it just hasn't manifested for me. But I think also that kind of relates back to the psychological aspects of it. Your brain has to accept that it's possible. And I don't know if it is possible for one person to, move a pen with the power of their mind or something. I don't know if that's possible. But when we put these other little psychological tricks into it, like there are more than one of us doing it, and maybe I'm a normal person, but the other person's the one that's got these powers, or the lights are off, and you think, well, I know I'm legitimate because I'm only touching the table, but maybe somebody else is maneuvering it with strings. I don't know because the lights are out.
Yeah.
Yeah, so it's it's interesting that we're spending a lot of time on this topic because it's not really my thing. It was just like something that I experienced, and it was really cool.
Yeah. Well, I think it's fascinating the different areas that you can get into when you start talking about psychic phenomenon. So,
Yeah, absolutely.
yeah.
When you do a deep dive into the energy world, it's so many different rabbit holes you can go down.
Yeah. So you come back and it sounds like you didn't go right into working professionally.
No, I worked in the corporate world for years. Well, actually, I was a flight attendant. I worked at Delta Airlines for 10 years. Started out as a flight attendant and French interpreter on international flights, and then flight attendant supervisor, and then working in the general offices, corporate communication. I built the first intranet website for the in-flight service department. And then I resigned from Delta to go into web design, web development. I worked for a few weeks for another company and then ended up starting my own company for web design, development, marketing, and ran that company for approximately 20 years. In fact, my husband and I still co-own that business, and he still runs it today, 24 years later. But I left that world and went full time with my psychic mediumship services back in 2019. That's when I went full time.
hmm And you said that you were being pushed by spirit or spirit suggested. Can you talk about that? Because for some people who haven't had that experience, that is
Yeah.
not easily explainable.
Yes, this one was really very meaningful to me. I had been seeking for decades, what type of work could I do? What is my path? I want to make a difference in the world. And we with at the web design firm, we donated a portion of our income to nonprofits, and we gave discounts to nonprofit organizations. We tried. There's so many things. We adopted our children, and went vegetarian, rescued animals, like so many things that we did to try to make a positive difference in the world. But I just felt like there was more that I was supposed to do. And so what happened was it was in 2017, my husband and I were on a hike at DuPont State Forest at these beautiful waterfalls called High Falls. And he was doing some photography. He's an excellent photographer. And I was sitting at the base of the falls, meditating and getting in touch with nature and spirit and praying and talking to my loved ones who crossed over. And I just asked for a sign. I said, I want to make a positive difference in the world. If there's something I can do to help others that I'm not already doing, please give me a sign and I'll try to listen and follow that. Well, I was expecting something subtle, a friend loans me a book or something like that. What I got was a lightning bolt. No, I'm kidding. But it felt like might as well have been. What I got was a direct message from spirit. It just popped into my head like a thought that came out of nowhere. And the answer was that I should learn to channel for loved ones who crossed over. And at the time, like I knew what a medium was, but I certainly never identified as one myself. And so I just said, okay, how shall I do this? And I just, boom, got the answer right into my head. It just popped in. And that was to read books, spend time in meditation, and connect with other psychics and mediums. So I started doing all of that right away. By the end of the month, I was channeling.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah, it was
So it came
crazy.
very natural for you.
It did. And now in hindsight, I realized that there were a couple of times when I had connected with spirit previously, but I just didn't recognize that as being what a medium does, the way a medium does that. Because, so many of us, when we think of a medium, we think of what Hollywood would portray, where, you're visually seeing the apparition and you're having a conversation like I would have a conversation with you. And it's not like that. It's more like you get a feeling that comes over you and little tidbits of information kind of come at you, a little quick little visual flash of an image, or you might imagine hearing something. It's much more subtle than Hollywood portrays it.
Hmm. And I think that that's one of the fascinating things for me about mediums, and I'm fascinated with mediums. Absolutely, just love the whole topic. But it's almost like a different language
It is.
that you have to learn. In other words, we're communicating by blowing these little sounds out of our mouths. When you're talking with spirit, they're going to be using imagery, they're going to be using your body so that you feel emotions or you feel sensations. It's a completely different vocabulary that I think could take so long to catch up on.
It definitely is a process. Yeah. And, when I started out, I was getting little hits, but they were small hits, or more subtle things where, like, for the first month or two, people were telling me that I was getting hits. And I was thinking, well, that's good. That's good. But maybe I'm just lucky. I still was very hard on myself because I wanted to be evidential. And then one day I was talking to some clients and I said, is there a Ray or a Roy? And everybody in the room gasped. His name is Roy Ray. I was like, holy wow,
Oh,
I am really getting this. I'm really doing this. This is real.
yeah,
Uh,
there's no denying that.
yeah. So since then, getting exact names has definitely been one of the things that I strive for. And I do tend to get them in about 60% of my readings. So knock on wood. I
That's
hope
amazing.
that continues. But
For
back to
those,
what you were saying about the signs, the language. Yes, it's different for everybody depending on what your strengths are as a medium. So, for example, I'm an empath, so I do feel the emotions of others. I'm clairvoyant, so I psychically see images. Clairaudient, so I hear messages. Clairalient, so I get psychic smells. Clairsentient, so I physically feel the energy. And also claircognizant, so sometimes I just know things. So different mediums are going to have different skills. For example, you'll notice I did not describe clairgustant. That's when you have taste. I almost never taste something as a psychic sign. And for a long time, I never got clairaudience, the psychic smell. But one day I was in a reading for somebody, and all of a sudden I got this horrible stench of body odor. And I was like, uh-oh, I know I showered today. Is this my clients and or is this spirit? And if it's, how do I approach the subject? Because I don't want to insult my clients. You know, it was really awkward because at that point, I didn't know if this was from my physical nose or my psychic sense of smell. And ultimately, I just gently brought it up. I said, hey, ladies, you know, we all have those times when the deodorant doesn't work. I'm just smelling this body odor. And they were like, yes. Turns out that my client who had lost her fiance had really, really loved his aroma. He used to work out all the time, and then he would come home from working out, and she was really into his aroma. So much so that her friend who was here with her told on her that she had actually tried to climb into the casket to smell his body one last time. So that was just amazing. So skills develop over time. And so, yeah, this secret language that we talk about, it might be something where you're getting a scent all of a sudden, or you might psychically hear something, a little flash. But another thing that a lot of people don't know is that mediums who are more advanced tend to develop a whole repertoire of signs and symbols. So, for example, if I visually see the image of an alligator, to me, that's going to be one of my symbols for the state of Florida. And so I might just see that and I'll say, oh, I'm getting a reference to Florida. Oh, yes, my boyfriend was from Florida, or whatever the spirit is that I'm channeling.
You know why you just said that?
Tell me.
Because I live in Florida.
Ah,
That's
and
why
there was,
you saw that alligator.
okay. You know, it is interesting that that's not normally the first sign that I will bring up. So you may be right about that. Yes.
Yeah.
But then there are other symbols as well. So, for example, I might physically feel something on my head. And if I feel it like on the top of my head or kind of randomly, that might be a symbol that someone had a head injury. The spirit that I'm channeling had a head injury or a fall. Whereas if I feel something on the left side of my head, this is where I'm going to receive if somebody had a stroke, an aneurysm, or a blood clot. If I
Wow.
receive something across the front of my forehead, typically that's going to indicate some sort of issue with brain function, such as Alzheimer's, dementia, cognitive decline. So I have different symbols because for me, the clairsentience, the physical feel of energy, is one of my stronger ones. I've developed different places that mean different things. I've
Okay, so what I don't understand is how do spirits know that? Because I know most mediums have symbols. When I see this, it means this. When I see this, it means birthday. When I see this. But how does a spirit know? Are they able to read you almost immediately and understand what your little roadmap is for your symbols?
That is a great question. I wish I knew the answer completely, but I don't. I just think that they're at such a high vibration, and I also know that I work with spirit guides, so I imagine that my spirit guides probably know all of my symbols and probably help when there's specific things, but I don't know. I don't
Yeah.
know. It just works.
Yeah. And so I would imagine that, oh, this is also fascinating to me. I could pepper you with questions all night. So I would imagine that in the course of you working on your mediumship or getting more in the groove, you have developed more and more symbols. And
Yes.
do you find yourself actively like, okay, this is a new experience, now that's my symbol. And you kind of log that in
Yes.
as, when you're working with me, this is what you need to do or
Mhm.
say or show me if you want me to understand this particular issue.
Yes, yeah, absolutely. And it's interesting, it works both ways. Like I can decide, hey, I want to have a symbol for this. What can it be? It's going to be this. And I can kind of put that out there into the universe, and they'll start using it. Or the opposite can happen where I will perceive something in a reading and then I'll understand what the meaning is. I'll like start to kind of describe this is what I'm feeling and I don't know what it means. And then my client will say, oh yeah, it means this happened to me. And I'll be like, oh, okay. And then the next time I'll start to feel that, I'll say, oh, is it this? Yeah. And so that's a sign or a symbol that spirit has taught me.
Okay. So when you actually sit down to read someone, and I would imagine that a lot of what you do is now over the internet.
Yeah, it's about half and half. I
Oh,
do,
okay.
I have a little office in Asheville, North Carolina, where I'm based, where I live.
Mhm.
And then I also do readings by phone and video call for clients all over the world.
Yeah. So you're in front of the client and you're starting to work. Can you kind of describe for us what the process is? It's like, do you see someone? Do people line up? You start get, I mean, what goes on for you
Sure.
inside of you that is giving you that information, and how does it change how you perceive what's going on around you?
Mm-hmm. I do have a very specific way that I go about opening up my sessions and then closing down my sessions. And this is really important, I feel, for anybody who works with energy to be able to say, hey, I'm working. Okay, I'm not working. I try to be open for the occasional pop in, like if spirit had to reach me for some reason. But in general, I just want to be able to live a quote normal life when I'm not working. So I have a way that I open up the session and then I close it down. For me, it is I take a deep cleansing breath and I visualize my chakras opening up. And then I have this phrase that I say when I'm opening the session. I'll say, I'm opening the door and clearing the way to invite guides or spirits of high vibration or benevolent intent to bring forth positive messages that serve highest good. Thank you. And then when my session is complete, I'll close it by saying, thank you so much for coming through today. I'm ending the session, closing the door with love and gratitude. Thank you.
Oh, that's beautiful. Yeah.
Thanks.
So as the session starts, you've opened the door.
Mhm.
Can you give us just an example of a regular session or a
Yeah.
fairly
So
normal
typically
session?
what happens next is I always want to get certain pieces of key information from spirit first. So for example, I will always ask gender, relationship, how did they die? And most times spirit will respect that. Sometimes spirit will be like, no, first we have to talk about golf. That happened the other day. And it turns out that it was my client's father, and that was a key way that they had connected. So he was really pleased with that. But for the most part, I start with gender, relationship, and how did they pass. So for me, because again, the physical feel of energy is one of my stronger clairs, I will pick up things spatially. So for example, I will say, is it male or female? And if it's a female, I tend to feel it more on my left side. If it's a male, I tend to feel it more on my right side. And then I'll say, okay, great, thank you, female. And then I'll say, all right, what generation? If it is an older generation, I'll tend to feel it above the client. So, like a mother, or sometimes I'll feel it even higher up, and that's like the next generation, a grandmother. I might feel it to the side, and that's going to be the same generation. So a sister, a friend, a partner, a cousin, an acquaintance, the farther out we go. If it's below, that's going to be a daughter or a niece. All of I'm feeling this on the left side. And of course, the left side all corresponds the same way to masculine energy, father, son, etc. And it even goes so far as to say, let's say I'm feeling it above and to the right, then that's going to be an ant. So spatially, that's one of the signs and symbols that I use. Like I said, different mediums are going to do different things, but that's the system that I use.
Yeah. So you start out and you get the evidence for the sitter.
Yes.
And for those who are not familiar with mediumship, can you just describe what evidence means in the
Yeah.
world?
So
Yeah.
Right. So I'm an evidential medium. That just means that I'll pick up on details such as a spirit's appearance, their personality, how they passed, and as we mentioned before, exact names come through. More than half of my readings get some exact names, so I'm very thankful for that.
Yeah,
So
that's quite a skill.
I've worked at it, trust me. And it's still not perfect, but I do all right. But these little tidbits are details that I couldn't possibly have known. And so they're details that show you that your loved one truly is with me. And then after we've had enough evidential information where you know that this is truly your loved one, then the other messages of healing and love are much more impactful. Because
Yeah.
if I say something like, your father's so proud of you, that is really, if I were to say it by itself, okay, that's nice. But if I say it after I said I'm picking up on a reference to teeth, oh, I'm a dental hygienist. And then I would say your father's proud of you. Then it's like, wow. In fact, that's an exact moment that I caught on video and have published on my social media. So those little moments where I get the evidential hits, it's so fun.
Yeah, it's very rewarding and it feels so good for the client too, to just
Yes,
have that comfort.
yes. Yeah,
Hmm.
absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's the
So
thing is that I bring people inner peace, and that to me is just one of the most wonderful feelings in the world.
yeah, it's very rewarding, I would imagine. Do you often have more than one spirit come in during a reading, or do you sometimes get a room full?
Yes, I very often have more than one. I would say maybe in 30% of my readings, I'll have just one spirit that pretty much dominates the whole session. But in most readings, I have a handful that come through, at least two, and often more.
Yeah. So as the medium, the person kind of running the communication, how do you decide who to go to next?
Well, I'm not always in control of that. You know, I can put out the invitation, whom we'd like to hear from. I can put the intention out there. Okay, thank you for coming through. We're moving on now. But ultimately, it's up to spirit and, of course, my spirit guides to help be a gatekeeper.
Yeah. So do you feel like your guides really do assist you during
Yes,
this whole process?
I do. I do.
Yeah. Do you guys ever, you and your guides, just sit down and talk about what you're doing and saying, well, maybe we should shift this or do this? Like, is it an ongoing, like a team meeting?
You know, that sounds like the way Hollywood would present it, right?
Okay.
But in reality, it's more like little flashes of information and feelings for me
Hmm.
anyway.
Yeah. How has this affected that part of you that was looking for something more?
I am eternally grateful to be able to do what I'm doing now. Yeah, I love my work. I love helping people. I still think it's super cool when I pick up on random little details, funny family stories, exact names. It's just incredibly rewarding to me.
Yeah, I would imagine so. It's a very feel-good profession.
Yes.
Yeah, it is. So I want to know how, you have this connection to spirit. There's spirits around us all the time. And I know that because my cat watches them in my house. I can see my cat looking over in the corner. I'm going, all right, well, I wonder who that is.
Yeah.
How do you manage the traffic in your brain? In other words, do you just say not now, or when the door is closed, the door is closed?
A little bit of both. I mean, for the most part, when the door is closed, I'm good. I proceed and just go about my business like anybody else would. But I do try to allow to be open for an occasional pop in. For example, a dear friend of mine just transitioned into spirit after a battle with cancer this past week. And so I was talking about how great she was telling somebody else, and I felt her energy just come around me. And so little things like that, I definitely want to allow myself to be open, but I don't want to allow myself to be sidetracked or steamrolled over. as when I'm trying to just live a normal life.
Yeah. I would imagine if you were open all the time, it would be exhausting.
It, yeah, it is. I mean, even now when I'm working and I have that focus, it is exhausting. I limit the number of readings I can do in a day because I find if I do too many, the later readings don't feel as strong to me. So I limit the number of readings that I do. And even after that, sometimes I will go home at the end of the day and I just have to take a nap because
Yeah.
it is draining. Yeah.
Yeah. Is it physically draining because you have to focus so much, or it's just a lot of energy that you're working through every day?
I think it's probably a little bit of both. I'm thinking because when I do psychic readings, I will say that if I spend a full day doing nothing but psychic readings, I'm tired at the end of the day. But if I do a full day of nothing but channeling mediumship readings, then I'm more likely to need a nap. So it
Oh,
is a
that's
little more
interesting.
stressful or a little bit more of a energy strain when I'm
Mhm.
channeling spirits.
Yeah. Okay, I have a question about the psychic part of your work because this is something I've never understood. When you talk with a psychic, they'll say, okay, what I see is this. I
Mhm.
see this concept or this career change or this and that. What are you seeing that I can understand if you have a spirit there talking to you?
Mhm.
That makes sense to me because you're just picking up an additional vibratory
Mhm.
experience. This person is in spirit, they're not in physical, and they're
Mhm.
sharing thoughts with you. I get that. But when it comes to psychic ability, I don't get it. It's like, what? Because it's not talking to you. How do you see it? Can you help me understand that?
I can tell you about my experience, but I don't know 100% what the mechanics are either. I can tell you that, everything is made up of energy. Even the physical items that we see in our surroundings, it's all atoms that at a molecular level are vibrating. So everything is energy. And as a psychic, I'm tuning in to the energy. And I don't, well, like you mentioned, for example, I see this so and so career for you. That is, you're using the word see, which may or may not be literal. But if it's literal, then you're using clairvoyance. And when I'm using my clairvoyance, I will literally have an image pop into my head visually, like the little movie screen in your head. Whereas for me, a lot of things that I pick up on feel more like a knowing, claircognizance, or a feeling, which is more empathy, or it's actually a form of clairsentience, but that feeling. And the way it happens is, for me, this, like I said, the strongest is feeling. Like, for example, I was doing a reading with someone earlier today, and they talked about where they wanted to move to, or where they should move to. And I mentioned a city, and they said yes, that they had a connection to that city. And then as we were talking, like as I was tuning into the vibration around the opportunities in that city, I got a rush of information, or a rush of feeling, a rush of energy. And so that happens sometimes, especially like if a client is talking to me and they're like, well, I don't know if I want to do this or I want to do that. And I was like, that, you want to do that? Because the other one will be like, when they mention it, I'm like, and then they mention this one, and I'm like, I'll suddenly get a rush, like chills sometimes come over me. Yeah,
So
it's crazy.
it sounds like a very different, although it's still reading energy,
Yes,
it's reading energy in a very different way.
yes, yeah, it is. And it's funny, the longer I do this professionally and full time, where I'm really doing it a lot, I definitely have noticed that my skills have increased over the years. It's just like a muscle, the more you use it, the stronger you get. And I have discovered that the way I perceive the world has slightly shifted since I've been doing this. Actually, one thing, and this is the first time I've ever revealed this publicly, so you're the first to know, I've reached a point in my life where even when I'm not working, as just a quote normal time of my day, visually, I can see energy. in its abstract form, and it's like a white mist. I don't see it always, but if I just kind of defocus my eyes a certain way, I'll see it looks like it's a foggy day or something. I'm seeing this sort of a white mist floating around. It's crazy.
Oh, I love that.
Yeah.
I love that. So
Yeah.
with your psychic abilities, let's say you're out in public,
Mhm.
it's like when you're around a lot of people, there's a lot of energy, there's a lot of stuff going on. Do
Mhm.
you ever get just hits from people that you don't know, that you just read their energy signature and you can get some information?
I hear stories like this from people who claim that that's their experience, and I understand. I mean, I'm definitely a highly sensitive person, but I have a way of putting up my shield so that I can go into a concert or a crowded restaurant and enjoy myself. So it's a little different. If I didn't intentionally put up the shield, then I think it would be a little overwhelming. But even then, I just feel like a certain amount of shield is natural, is instinctive. For example, it's our bodies already do this thing where we have selective attention. And say, for example, you are in a restaurant and you're being served a wonderful chocolate souffle. You're not focused on the sensation of the chair that you're sitting in. You're focused on the sensation of taste. And so that's that selective attention. We do it automatically in our physical lives. And I feel like to a certain extent, it's instinctive to do that in our energy lives as well.
I agree with you that I think humans are psychic. Just, out of the box, we're psychic. We just don't develop it. It's not encouraged in our culture. Little kids often will talk about experiences and they say, oh, that's your imaginary friend, or, oh, that's a great story, instead of understanding that this child is actually connecting to energy that we're not seeing as adults. So I do think that we are all psychic. It's just we're in different stages of development of that. But I
Mhm.
could also see how if you're, and I've talked to friends who've had a Kundalini experience where you have no boundaries. You can hear things 3 miles away. There's just the boundaries that we experience in this physical world aren't there for them for a period of time until they can integrate it. It's unnerving to have that. If you were listening, if you were able to listen and connect into every person you came across, and it would be, you'd never leave the house. It'd be exhausting.
Mhm.
Yeah.
True.
So do you ever use, and I'm sure that you do, I mean, why wouldn't you? Do you ever use your skills and gifts in your own life as far as decision making, or, oh, if I do this, how's that going to pan out, and kind of follow the timeline? How do you utilize this skill for yourself? And I imagine that you do. It's too good not to.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, of course, I do try to just be intuitive about what's the best path for me to take. Absolutely. And sometimes there will be a specific decision that needs to be made, and I'll tune in around that or ask my guides for guidance. For example, we had a situation a few years back where a vehicle that we had handed down to our son was on its last legs. It needed some. It was nice when we gave it to him. Don't get me wrong. It wasn't a bummer gift. But anyhow, it was like years later. It was at the point where it needed these repairs, and so it needed so many repairs that we looked at the cost of repairing the vehicle versus the cost of buying a different reliable used vehicle. And it was like 50-50. So how do we decide? So at that point, Kelly was thinking, oh, let's keep it. I was like in this frugal mentality and thinking that would somehow be better. But because the numbers were about 50-50, we decided that I should tune into my guides and ask. So I did that, and I felt that I was getting pulled in the opposite direction. that actually it was time to let that vehicle go. And then I do this thing where I'll ask for a sign to validate that I've heard it correctly. And so what I did is I said, all right, well, I'm hearing that it's time to let it go. But if I'm correct, I want a sign and I want it to be a red car. And I'm going to go and look up on Craigslist the cars for sale. And I want there to be a red car there. So I went, and sure enough, first car on Craigslist was red. So I'm like, okay, I got it right. And it's time to let that car go.
Yeah, I love that. And you know, we do, when we ask, we get our
Mhm.
answers, which is lovely.
Yeah.
Yeah. So when in your business, do you do mostly mediumship or mostly psychic readings, or is it kind of 50-50?
I'd say it's about 50-50 for me,
Yeah.
actually. It's funny because I feel like the mediumship readings are the most are typically a little more spectacular. And I can say this with some, there's a reason. I was just the other day, for example, I was doing a psychic reading for somebody. But at the beginning of the psychic reading, I was like, oh, wait, by the way, I've got to pop in here. Spirit's coming in for you. It's this, grandmother, and she's, passed from the lungs, and she just wants you to know she's okay. And it was a very quick, simple little, nothing in depth. But at the end of the psychic reading, and the psychic reading was good too, but the end of the whole reading, my client says, yeah, having my grandmother come through, that was my favorite part. And that is often the case. And I think maybe because the evidential hits can be so strong with the mediumship, I do get evidential information as a psychic where I'll get psychic hits that are right on. Like, for example, today I was able to mention two cities by name that my client was considering, or I was able to get an exact profession that she had been doing, things like
Wow.
that. So I do get psychic hits that are specific as opposed to just, general tarot readings. But the mediumship, the evidential hits that come through there tend to be a little more spectacular, in my opinion.
Yeah. Well, it's so emotionally charged to
Yeah,
be able to connect with someone that you just dearly love, that you miss, and you wish they were here, and then you get to talk with them. It can just, change your whole day, your whole month.
exactly. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, that's true. Well, this has been so fascinating talking with you. I'm so glad I met you in Sedona. I can't wait to go back next year.
Yes, and in fact, so you and I met at the Sedona Transcendence. No, excuse me, the Sedona Ascension
Ascension.
retreat. And my company, Channeling White Light, was a sponsor for
I
that event.
know. I saw you on stage.
Yes. But then the next event that the same Suzanne Ross, the conference organizer, is doing is in September at the autumn equinox, and that is the Sedona Transcendence retreat. And
Okay.
I'm going to be one of the featured presenters at
Oh,
that
you
event.
are.
I'm actually going to be doing a group mediumship reading there for
Mhm.
the whole audience, 200 or 300 people.
Oh, wonderful. Well, we'll list that conference in the description box down
Perfect.
below. Okay.
Nice.
If someone wants to find out more about you, and I'm sure there are a lot of people will, how do we do that?
Well, the main way is through my website, channelingwhitelight.com. On my website, you can learn all about my services and sliding scale rates, read my reviews, watch video excerpts of my actual readings, see my full availability, and book appointments, all there,
Oh,
channelingwhitelight.com.
wonderful. And are you on YouTube?
Yes, I'm on pretty much all the social media platforms. So yes, I have a
Okay.
YouTube channel. Again, Channeling White Light is my company name, because I'm channeling white light towards a better world.
Mhm.
So all of my social media usernames will be Channeling White Light. So you can find me on YouTube, Channeling White Light, Instagram, Facebook, TikTok.
You're a busy girl.
Yes, I am.
Yeah. Kelly will have all your information listed in the description box down below. Thank you so much for taking
Yeah.
time to talk with us today. It was just lovely to have this chance to get to know you better.
Oh, it's been such a pleasure, Kimberly. Thank you so much for having me. I really appreciate it.
Yeah. Bye-bye, everyone. Thanks for watching.
Bye.
Bye.
I hope you enjoyed this video. Coming up next, this is a good one, or you might really like this one too. Either one of them could be perfect for you. Before you leave, don't forget to subscribe.